Hello and welcome to Trying Times. My name is Carmen, and if you're new here, then we're pretty much friends. No pressure. That's just like the warmest welcome I could think of, so yeah, we're friends now. If you didn't have a chance to listen to episode 42 right before this, then this will be a really quick recap of what that was about. It was recently my birthday, and I decided to do a mini series that focuses on different TV shows and films that I like and things that I find creatively interesting or inspiring, or that I generally find cool in the realm of storytelling. So this will be the first of 3 episodes in total that will focus on that, and I'll be kicking this off with the TV series Never Have I Ever. I think before I really get into the show though, and the storyline, I'll say this much. A lot of people either love or dislike this show, and I think a lot of that has to do with things in relation to the storyline, to stereotypes, and other fairly relative factors. I want to say that I think this show is definitely a big step in a new direction that teenagers now are able to see and potentially relate to. With that being said, I think this is also a show that shares a different perspective from other teen series that, again, really boosts that relatability factor. So when this show first came out, I believe I was around 23 or 24 years old, and immediately the first thing I thought was I would have felt so able to relate to the storyline and the main character, and also just feel more seen and heard by simply seeing someone kind of like me on screen. So now looking at this as an adult, this is something I look at and I get excited because I just think about all the people that are able to potentially relate to this, whether that's the story, the character, whatever, and at whatever point in their life. I think it opens up this possibility for people to, maybe be able to feel seen and maybe even help out people who can now find humor in something that they hadn't been able to see on screen before in this kind of way. So to me, that makes this type of programming pretty special. While I know this is, again, a teen series, you're probably like, it's not that deep. I think it kind of can be because I'm seeing it from the perspective of those who haven't been able to relate before or who haven't felt seen or heard. So it's just a step in a direction that can, I think, open that up more and allow others to feel more seen and more heard. So there's that. That's my spiel about it. That's not the whole episode, although it sounds like it could be. On the other hand, though, I am totally aware that this is not at all summing up the South Asian or overall marginalized experience for every single person. And I think genuinely that that's something that is impossible to do for every single person. I think, yes, we may be able to relate to certain factors, but I think to perform one instance or situation and have that relate to 100% of an audience is just not possible, in all honesty. I think if 30%, maybe 50%, or even 60% can relate, that's huge. I think it's still a step in the right direction because it's opening up doors for more stories to be highlighted and be shared and so forth. So that's my thoughts on why I chose to share more about this show. And I think naturally I saw 3 factors that immediately popped up the first time I watched the show. One would be the ability to balance milestones in life, or more so even with traumatic events, and balance that with humor. So if you've watched the show, then you surely have become familiarized with the root of the main character Davy's story. If you haven't watched this and you want to, then maybe just stop this episode right here, because I don't know if this is entirely a spoiler alert. It could be, I guess. But basically you learn in the very first episode of the show why Davy is the way that she is. She experiences extreme trauma following the passing of her father, and this shows up in a number of ways. But in a nutshell, we see how much this has made her very much the way she is, especially in having impulses, and I think just being extreme altogether. And I think a lot of this can be related to the fact that, she is just a teenager who's trying to figure things out. So that's totally normal. When I think of that in my life and think of that point in time, everything just feels chaotic. So I think coupling that with the fact that she experienced such extreme trauma at a young age definitely elevates that to a new level. So on top of her trauma basically forming, occurring, and being known amongst her entire school, she is faced each day with this sort of discomfort within her culture. That's sort of like the multifacet to, I think, a lot of her struggles. She feels afraid of being seen at all within this because I think from her perspective, she feels like it could take away from her social status, which she is continuously trying to raise above the bar. So over the course of the first season, she grows to become a little bit more familiarized within this. And over the course of the show, she becomes a bit closer to her family through traditions, which is also really interesting and wholesome to see, I think. So that's the first thing. The second thing I really noticed within the show was the focus on the main characters and the fact that this was definitely not the stereotypical, like, cool crowd, quote unquote, I guess you could call it. It very much focuses heavily on the outside of that and then looks in at the cool crowd. So since so much of Davy's focus is on her love interest, also known as literally the most popular kid at her school, this involves not only sharing an in-depth look at her life, but basically matching that level of voyeurism into his life and his friends' lives. So I found this pretty interesting, as in a lot of other shows I've seen this type of friend group being the main focus, it usually sticks to that group and then has a minimal focus on the cool crowd, whereas here, I want to say it's almost like a 50-50 balance. There's screen time and understanding of Davy and her friends, but then on the other hand, there's screen time and understanding of her crush Paxton and his friends. So now you're not only learning about Davy, her background, where she's at both mentally and emotionally, but you have that chance to gain insight on Paxton as well. So I think that's really interesting how there's that strong duality to both, and you can kind of see where they're both at. But it's interesting because, again, they're in high school. They're just trying to figure things out. Everything is so chaotic and can feel so clustered, but it gives you this extra layer of insight, which is really, really cool, I think. So that's number 2. The third and last thing I'll touch on is the ability to showcase Davy's journey of self-discovery through a total cloud of chaos. Kind of like I just said, at that age, everything's chaotic, like all the time. Nothing is ever chill. Everything's chaotic. Everything's a very big deal. And it's just how it goes. So I think this all ties into point 2 that I just talked about, of very obviously having that insight into her mental and emotional state, which, is very much continued throughout the show. I think this ties very well into the previous point I just made about having that insight, that very obvious insight, I should say, into her mental and emotional state consistently throughout the show. So if she's struggling, which naturally happens often, we as an audience are made very aware of this. If she's excited about something, we know it. If she's about to spiral, we can see the warning signs of whatever might come next. So as the show progresses, we can consistently understand all of these phases and these stages through Davy's perspective, but we can also see how she learns lessons deeply. So as the show progresses again, the situations and issues progress to be more and more severe each season. And that means that the consequences to those situations become more severe as well. As she progresses through these sort of times and situations, you can see that she slowly begins to learn more and more about the world around her and how this affects her overall self-awareness levels. And I think, yes, all in all, it might seem a bit slow. Again, she's like a high school student, so it's not going to be like boom overnight. She has all this self-discovery and insight, and she's like a newfound person. But I think there's a huge aspect to self-discovery there that is really, really interesting. And it's very honest in sharing that though she might still struggle, she slowly pieces together different areas of her life by going through the motions and being able to face consequences a bit better. I think all in all, there are so many other factors involved in the show and what can be easily learned from the style of character and the style of storytelling, but those are the 3 aspects of the show that stood out to me right from the get-go when I first watched the show up until now. And I think the final season is now fully out and available on Netflix, so if anyone wants to watch that and hasn't yet, you can literally go do that and probably watch the whole thing in a day, honestly. I would recommend. It's definitely a bit of an emotional roller coaster. You might feel a little sad, annoyed, but then you'll be laughing 5 seconds later. So if you're into that sort of thing, then I would recommend watching it. But yeah, that wraps up the very first episode in this mini-series, and I really enjoyed getting to talk a bit more about the show that I honestly enjoyed and can't wait to talk about a film in the next episode, so I'm excited for that. And for now, if you want to talk more about this show, this episode, or even if you have a recommendation for a show, then please feel free to DM me on Instagram at the Trying Times Podcast, or leave me a voicemail by clicking the link in the episode description. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to share some more of my favorite shows and films with you. We'll chat again soon, okay? Bye.